Learn the absolute truth that white oppressive forces don't want black people to ever learn. In 1968, in response to that decade's unprecedented unified black protests, white oppressive forces began deploying an elaborate propaganda campaign to manipulate the collective minds of the black masses to perceive ourselves as being our own worst enemies and to revere our oppressors in spite of a brutally horrific history of the contrary. They determined that by doing so, they could demoralize us, divide us, and shift the collective aggressions of the black masses away from their white oppressive society and redirect it towards and against ourselves. It's how they subdued the unprecedented unified black protests that emerged during the 1960s. It's how they stopped the Black Power movement. And it's how they prevent it from happening now. They also determined that as long as they keep us within this collective condition, we can then be ruled over forever. And it has worked like a charm. It is the truth that they don't want us to ever learn. It's why my contents are the most shadow banned and most restricted on all social media platforms. They also prevent us from learning this truth by spreading lots of disinformation and misinformation into our communities in regards to our plight and condition. They've got our people now drowning in false information in regards to our plight and condition. Case, point, and proof. They've got our people so disinformed and so misinformed that millions are now insisting that a Bible that was in fact brutally beaten into submission within the blood-soaked minds of our enslaved ancestors will now ridiculously set us free. That's an insane belief that is ridiculously now believed by millions of us. They also have millions of us insanely, ridiculously believing that a religious book written by our most ungodliest enemies contains the true words of God. They also have millions of us insanely, ridiculously believing that we're the true Jews found within a fictional Bible written by our most ungodliest enemies. These beliefs are all ridiculous. They've also got us ridiculously believing that we're being controlled by a silly slave syndrome myth. That is a feeble-minded myth because it's absolutely not how true brainwashing is achieved. The reason why they have us believing so many falsehoods in regards to our plight and condition is because if our understandings of our plight and conditions are kept flawed, then all of our liberating remedies and strategies that stems from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. They also now have millions of African Americans now believing that we're not from Africa, but that we are instead the true indigenous Americans. However, countless millions of DNA analysis testings have scientifically confirmed our African ancestry. The narrative that we're not from Africa is fraudulent propaganda created by white propagandists. It's designed to separate us from our unifying African heritage. Without having a base identity to connect to our vast cultural wealth, over time, we become further fragmented and we become weaker as a people. We can then be made into anything the white oppressors wants us to be. The propaganda campaign that claims that we African Americans are not Africans is also designed to divide us from Native Africans. When we Africans are divided globally, we lose our global numerical advantage and we're stripped of all hopes of ever defeating global white supremacy. The false narrative that we African Americans are the true indigenous Americans also creates profound division between us and the true indigenous Americans. when two oppressed groups of people are divided in the U.S., this makes the U.S. system of white supremacy much more stronger. They also have millions of African Americans believing that we made the N-word ours and that using it ridiculously empowers us. Those beliefs are both the opposite of the truth. It was actually white men that manipulated millions of us to self-identify ourselves by the N-word through negative media social engineering. Because they control our media images, they're able to negatively steer our culture without most of us even realizing it. Because we become those derogatory media depictions of our group that we accept as being our true reality. It was originally through white-produced black exploitation films that the N-word was originally embedded into our culture. The process is now being continued and reinforced through the white-controlled hip-hop industry. We must wake up to our reality. The reason they socially engineered us to self-identify ourselves by the N-word is because to subjugate and control a large targeted population, the first step is to neutralize their alpha males, aka those possessing warrior spirits. These are also the males that are psychologically wired to protect our women and to defend our communities. White social engineering scientists neutralize the African American black alpha males by socially engineering millions to self-identify ourselves by the N-word. Because words have power over the subconscious mind. Words, when often repeated enough, shapes our thoughts. And a thought, when held long enough, becomes a belief. A belief then becomes your biology. We psychologically become the words that we repeatedly call ourselves. It's why men that call themselves thugs are more likely to engage in a fight than to avoid one. It's also why women that proclaim themselves as being bitches often become stubbornly unreasonable. We subconsciously become the words that we repeatedly call ourselves. It's a psychological phenomenon that white social engineering scientists have thoroughly studied. When we repeatedly call ourselves by the N-word, this conditions us to perceive ourselves through a false inherent subordinate identity that aids the white society in maintaining its social dominance and social capital over our lives. Have you ever noticed, for example, that those African Americans who refuse to call themselves by the N-word tends to carry themselves with a higher degree of self-respect, as well as commands more self-respect from others? Currently, many black men have been fooled to believe that they're making an impactful statement when they declare themselves as being a real N. I'm a real N. But those black men are totally ignorant of the fact that white social engineering scientists intentionally attach the term real N to black masculinity in order to get black men to insist that they're real N's. We embrace it because we think it has something to do with masculinity. But those black men are in fact ignorant of their own ignorance. I will not be silent to appease black ignorance, especially when it's black ignorance that gives our oppressors their greatest power and control over us. I'd rather lose black friends for telling the black liberating truth than to endorse ignorant false beliefs in order to hold on to ignorant, mentally enslaved black friends. Our core problem is that the ignorant and mentally enslaved ones are totally ignorant of their own ignorance and their own mental enslavement. And they therefore fight against those of us who are truly woke and who tries to educate them and free their minds. Furthermore, a speaker of truth has no friends, and those who know the truth must teach African proverbs. The truth is that calling ourselves by the N word actually conditions us to perceive ourselves through a false inherent identity. Regardless of how intelligent people are, if it's possible to control the input of information and media images that are fed into the minds of people, it's entirely possible to control what they will believe and how they will think. White oppressive forces exploits their monopoly over the information and media images that are fed into the collective minds of Black people to keep us believing and thinking in ways that are against our own self-interest, and instead in ways that serves and protect the system of white supremacy. Through this nefarious scheme, they've literally created a psychological prison for our minds. Fortunately, some of us are born with a sort of spiritual immune system that gives us the ability to see through the maze of lies and confusion that our oppressors have designed for us. Throughout generations, our ancestors have always provided us with those they've given the spiritual insight and an ability to see through the prisons that our enemies have created for our minds. Those of us that are blessed with this gift has a duty to teach those of us who weren't born with the gift. This is again why those of us who know the truth must teach. African proverb. It's the true reason why I post these videos on social media platforms. And it's the true reason why my content are heavily shadow banned and restricted. Brothers and sisters, it's time to learn the truth and spread the truth. We must function based upon what is true in order to liberate ourselves. One love and peace.